Hello and welcome to Sburb Done Quick. In this adventure, two players, the Heir of Space and the Maid of Time, will work together to beat Sburb as fast as possible by any means necessary. You have the opportunity to name their characters. The timer starts when player 1 is given a name, and it stops when both players enter into their new universe. Before we begin, I just want to give a quick shout out to VoFT Dubs for sponsoring the speedrun, and a big thank you to the developer iSmile. This one's for you.
And just so that everyone at home is aware, the speed that these players go at will result in some flashing images. So please, make sure that you take the appropriate safety precautions.
Alright, begin. A young speedrunner stands in his room, eager to start his any % speedrun of Sburb. He doesn't yet have a name. What shall his name be? That decision, dear viewers, belongs to you. Take as long as you need. The timer hasn't started yet. After many suggestions and the use of a random number generator, you give him the name Adrian Swift. That'll do. Now that that's out of the way, start the timer! And we're off! Adrian first needs to turn on his computer, which he does in no time. As it's booting up, he next needs to find his copies of Sburb. The locations of the discs is a little randomized, being either in the kitchen, the living room, or outside in the mailbox. There's this weird glitch with this drawer here where if you run into it in a certain way, you'll clip through the floor. Right now, below Adrian's room is the kitchen, so he's gonna do the glitch to save a bit of time getting down there. Looks like the discs are placed in the kitchen, which is the best possible outcome for us. Adrian's gonna quickly capture log those in his speedrun modus. His next goal is returning to his room to start the game. While Adrian makes his way back to his room, we can quickly talk about this speedrun modus. It's very similar to one of the default modus types, but the time to capture log and retrieve items is reduced, allowing runners to save just a bit of extra time when capture logging items. That kind of reduced time is also useful for pulling off another kind of exploit that we'll be seeing later in the run. Alright, now Adrian is going to use both the discs on his computer. His partner's doing the same thing right about now. Let's go watch her side of the speedrun thus far. Okay, so we've gone back in the past a little bit, which probably isn't very good for a speedrun, but we're doing it anyway. Here's the second player. Like the first, she doesn't have a name. That's your responsibility. With the help of another random number generator, you give her the name Ellie Miller. Very good, let's continue. So what Ellie's gonna do here is move a couple of items into more desirable positions for later on. She's got a bit of time to spare anyway while she waits for Adrian to get his discs. Hers are somewhere in the room already. Like with Adrian, Ellie's Sburb discs are also in random locations. Again though, all possible locations are in her room. Most of the time they're out in the open, typically on the floor or on her desk. Sometimes they're hidden under her desk though, which seems to be where they spawn this time around. Now Ellie's gonna insert those discs into her computer, and as she does so, Adrian is doing the same thing. Just like that, we are all caught up. Since Ellie has a larger and emptier room than Adrian, she connects as the client first so that she can use extra grist on revising Adrian's house. She'll need a platform outside of his room to put the alchemitor on. Alright, now they're just gonna place the machines down in whatever places work for them. Nothing too huge going on right now. If you haven't seen these two running Sburb before, you may be wondering why Adrian blocked Ellie's door with a totem lathe. Simply put, that's the most convenient spot for her, and she's not gonna need access to the rest of her house at all throughout the run. Adrian is going to drop Ellie's bed on her crux extruder to open it. Dropping the bed is probably the fastest way to open the crux extruder when the client player doesn't have an allocated strife specifist. They wouldn't be able to open it by themselves anyway, as it's generally a bad idea to put all of your skill points into raw strength as a speedrunner. It just makes so much more sense to put them into agility. Strength becomes pretty moot anyway after a few minutes when the runners acquire the denizen weapons. Since Ellie is playing as the time hero, she's going to do a bit of time travel here to help Adrian with his crux extruder while she has some downtime in the future. She's also going to be assisted by Adrian's future self here. Ellie is not only a time hero, but a very experienced Sburb runner, so she's also going to be playing as her sprite. When running Sburb, you generally want to prototype the time player, while prototyping something else would probably make certain late game enemies easier to deal with. It would also leave you with a confused sprite that may have a really hard time keeping up with you and assisting you. Ellie's sprite's now gotta work as Adrian's sprite too. You don't always have to prototype both sprites, but if you miss a crucial sequence break later, you can soft lock the entire game and end your run, so it's much safer to double prototype like this. Ellie's sprite and future Adrian will help out Adrian a bit here with getting his artifact, since his takes just a slight bit longer to solve. Entry artifacts are usually pretty consistent in Sburb, so he doesn't have to worry about getting something he doesn't know how to solve. Adrian's artifact is incredibly easy to solve, he just has to turn the hourglass over and wait for it to deplete. He's got a bit of time to kill now. Now that Adrian has his artifact, Ellie's sprite and future Adrian are gonna go help Ellie with hers. Her artifact's easy as well, she just needs to arrange the clock's hands to tell the current time. Ellie's sprite's gonna read the clock on her computer just to save an extra second. Future Adrian's just here to move Ellie's sprite through space. He'll be taken back to the future when Ellie enters. Ellie enters the medium successfully. Well done, Ellie! While Adrian has a bit of time here, he's gonna grab his laptop for later and also attempt another glitch. So this door here is kind of bugged. If he wedges himself between the desk and the door, two things occur. He's gonna start clipping upwards into the ceiling and eventually reach the roof, which is where he'll need to be upon entering. The second thing's a little more difficult to explain. Typically, if you wedge yourself in a door like this, you'll start taking damage, but one of the developers must have put the wrong damage value on this door because getting wedged will actually increase your max health to an absurd amount. This will come in handy for the king fight at the end of the run, which can otherwise be a bit tricky even with the overpowered weapons. Now that Adrian is on his roof, all he can really do is wait for that hourglass to deplete. He's just having a bit of fun up here. The hourglass finally depletes. Not the fastest time, but it could have been much slower. Adrian has successfully entered the medium. Congratulations! While Adrian was in the process of entering, Ellie needed to get a bit more grist to start construction on Adrian's house, so she's going to use the stuff she set up at the start of the game to launch herself out of her window. She's able to do this because the teal box is kind of weird physics. As Ellie is being launched, she's going to take a look at her land to make sure it's the one she wanted. She appears to have gotten the land of bridges and mist. Bridgeland is perfect though, so she doesn't have to worry much about getting lost. The second land modifier doesn't matter much as long as her land contains bridges. Next, she's gonna hope she got the Gyclops spawn coming up in a little bit. There's a Gyclops that can spawn directly in her path, which she can easily take down with the force of her launch. Gyclopses are among the toughest underlings in the game, able to withstand just about any attack with ease, so you can imagine just how forceful Ellie's launch has to be to one-shot the Gyclops at such a low level. The players have been blessed by RNGesus once again, because lo and behold, here's the Gyclops. First try. Ellie takes down the Gyclops and collects the dropped grist. There's also a hidden return node just off the side of the bridge that she's now going to jump into to return home. If the Gyclops didn't spawn on the first try, it wouldn't have been a huge deal. Ellie could have just jumped back into the return node to try the launch again. The run would have only been in trouble if it didn't spawn on the third try or so. Now that Ellie has some grist, Adrian quickly takes out his laptop and inserts a grist torrent disk into Ellie's computer. He also drops in a punch design X for later. Ellie, meanwhile, returns and gives all of her build grist to Adrian so that she can build his house upwards. Ellie quickly throws together a very primitive tower to Adrian's first gate. While she does this, Adrian surveys his land. Being the space player, of course, there's frogs. Seems the other modifier was woods though, that's a shame. Woods was probably the worst modifier he could have gotten. That may slow down their run a little, but as long as Adrian's movement in the next section is perfect, it won't be too big of a hassle. As Ellie finishes the tower, Adrian climbs the side and enters his gate. This process could have been faster if Ellie just put down a small staircase and had Adrian build up some momentum to launch off of it and into the gate, but that's an extremely difficult trick to pull off that these two have recently been having some bad luck with, so I guess they're gonna choose the safer option for now. Adrian is gonna immediately start performing an accelerated back hop in the direction of a nearby consort village. As said before, he has the land of woods and frogs, meaning this technique's gonna be a bit harder. See, he messed up that second hop there because he clipped the tree. Not a huge deal just yet, he's only lost a couple of seconds. Looks like he hit another tree about halfway through this section, so he's gonna switch up his strategy a little and just perform a slope-assisted bunny hop. By jumping off the roots of the trees, he can build up some extra momentum. That's another weird quirk of the physics engine, where jumping off slopes in a certain way and holding down the jump button will essentially convert all of your vertical momentum to horizontal. Okay, so Adrian finally found his way to the village. He has to quickly start a conversation with this guy here who tells him about the land and the denizen and stuff. Typically, he'd also talk about Skaia, but because Adrian's not really conversing with him, he skips over that topic. The game still thinks he knows how to beat the game now, though. Anyway, Adrian is just gonna skip through all this. He just needs to have triggered this dialogue, because otherwise the game can't be completed. Now that the consort's dialogue is over, Adrian is gonna move to the back of this building here. The geometry of the ground doesn't line up properly with the building, which exposes the map void. This is perfect for speedrunners because Adrian can use it to drop down straight into the denizen's treasure chamber. So Adrian has now made it into the denizen's treasure chamber, which does two things for the run. It provides him with the unbreakable crowbar, not to be confused with the extremely rare and dangerous Juju Breaker, one of the incredibly powerful denizen weapons. It also tricks the game into thinking his denizen has been defeated, thus allowing the ultimate alchemy event to be triggered at the end of the game. Alright, so there's no actual way for Adrian to get out of here with the denizen alive, so he's gonna be helped out by future versions of Ellie and himself. If he tried to escape the normal way, the denizen would have woken up and killed him, ending the run. Future Adrian and Ellie send present Adrian to this field here where higher leveled underlings spawn pretty commonly. Adrian is gonna stick around here for a while and grind out some levels so that he can reach God tier. While Adrian does that boring grindy stuff, Ellie's gonna launch herself out of her window again to do the same thing with the denizen. Her land requires a slightly different approach though. Ellie's now hoping a Gyclops doesn't spawn here. She needs the space to perform a large bunny hop to more or less the other side of the planet, while she'll find a consort village waiting relatively close to her denizen's lair. Looks like she got lucky again and got the outcome she wanted. She performs the bunny hop successfully and is now gliding across the land to her destination. Ellie makes it to the village and uses a slanted roof to reset her momentum and negate her fall damage. Now she's gonna skip through a consort's dialogue trigger that unlocks the denizen's lair. Now Ellie's gonna perform a technique called capture climbing, which is where you repeatedly capture log and release an item under your feet, essentially allowing you to climb up as high as you want. This trick's only really possible with the speedrun modus, so be sure you have one of those equipped if you want to try this technique yourself. Anyway, Ellie's gonna use this crate here to capture climb up to a higher up bridge. The reason Ellie wants to reach this upper bridge is because it tricks the game into thinking she's completed her planet's quest. The quests on bridge planets typically involve repairing them in some way, and this particular bridge is normally inaccessible until the bridges are repaired, or until you gain the ability to fly through god tier flying type items. Ellie has no flying ability, which tells the game she must have completed her quest to get up here. What this means is the denizen's AI will be broken, as it will simultaneously be thinking that Ellie's completed her quest, but also hasn't even started it. This will allow her into her denizen's treasure chamber even with the denizen awake. Ellie has just hit the trigger, so she can now head to her denizen's lair. She also discards the crate, she doesn't need it anymore. All she needs now is to bunny hop to the lair. Ellie isn't as experienced with accelerated back hops as Adrian is, so she's gonna stick to just a regular bunny hop. It's a bit slower, but easier to pull off and control than an ABH. There's the lair. In order to save as much time as possible, she's gonna need to pull off a perfect hop straight through that small doorway. It's an incredibly difficult trick to do, doubly so if you've chosen ABH. Unfortunately, Ellie is unable to pull it off and stops short at the front door. That's a shame, but it's alright, she's gotta press forward. Ellie eventually makes her way into the chamber. She's got this quick cutscene she's just gonna skip through of the denizen's introduction. You're not missing anything, it's bugged out anyway because of the whole broken AI thing. The denizen is just gonna sit there and repeat error handling messages over and over. It won't pose a threat to Ellie anymore. Ellie enters the treasure chamber and retrieves a miniature version of the weapon Fear No Anvil, which also unlocked her ultimate alchemy event. She now has to wait a moment for her partner to arrive. Shouldn't take too long. Speaking of her partner, let's go back to Adrian, who should be finishing up his grind right about now. He is very close to the top of his echelon ladder. The final level will be obtained on its own as Adrian makes his way to his next destination. What Adrian wants to do next is achieve God tier. He's most likely going to try a pond launch to get to his quest bed. The pond launch is a trick involving a particular pond in the woods modifier with a rock perfect for launching off nearby. It's in a small clearing as well, which gives Adrian plenty of room to ABH. Adrian has initiated the ABH and successfully pulls off the launch. He wanted to fly up as high as possible for the next step. He knows to find his quest bed and airstrafe over to it, which is fairly easy. He has located his quest bed just down below. Now he just needs to stick the landing. Success! Adrian lands directly on the bed and is killed instantly from the fall damage, but will be momentarily ascending over on Skaia. You may be wondering where all of his extra health for the door glitch went though. In this game, when you pass a certain height limit, you will immediately die upon touching the ground, no matter how much health you have. I think this mechanic was implemented to make the game feel just a touch more realistic. Adrian is now ascended as the heir of space. He's got a couple of jobs to do from here: prepare the Genesis Frog, and also assist with Ellie's upcoming time traveling duties. Adrian next has to return to his home. Ellie's sprite has been setting up a couple of buildings in the background for him to use in his frog breeding duties. Adrian's now going to teleport her to her house, and she's going to be taking Adrian's laptop there to perform all of the endgame server player duties, such as building up their houses to their maximum height. She'll be also pulling off various technical exploits and glitches in order to trick the game into thinking Skaia's battlefield has been 4x prototyped, just to skip past all of the other shenanigans that come with the maximum 2x prototype battlefield. This process typically involves an exploit called entry exploiting, which is where a player, most commonly the time player, triggers a player entry flag in the Sburb menu, making the game think there's extra players in the session. Unfortunately, this process can't be shown too much in detail simply due to the nature of the game, and also because Ellie's sprite doesn't technically count as a player character in this time frame. Adrian is a very experienced space runner, so he's done this many times before. He can typically finish this job in only around a minute through rapid teleportation. Now Adrian is going to stick with Ellie for a while. Ellie needs to make a device capable of time travel, so she's going to need Adrian to take her home to alchemize. Ellie quickly scoops up the required items for a time traveler watch. The recipe is a picture of herself, and watch, and Fear No Anvil. There's plenty of other recipes and devices she could choose, but she's found this recipe to be the most efficient so far. Adrian and Ellie are going to very quickly go back and free Adrian's past self from his denizen's lair and bring him to the grinding field. The next goal is to assist both of their past selves with their entry processes. Adrian takes Ellie to his house so she can get his truck extruder open, and then she's taken to her house where she prototypes herself, then back to Adrian's house for the second prototyping, etc, etc. Ellie quickly takes Adrian back to the present so he can complete the frog breeding quest. Most of the paradox creation work was done by Ellie's sprite off screen, so he doesn't have to worry too much about that. So Adrian is just going to put this tadpole in a metal water bottle from his fridge real quick, utilizing his space powers to purify and scale the bottle. He now needs to track down his land's forge. The forge is typically close to the space player's house and is also roughly facing Skaia, so it's very easy to find. So now Adrian is just going to drop that tadpole into the forge. If you're inexperienced with Sburb, don't worry, the tadpole likes it in there. Ellie returns from her time traveling duties and then sends herself and Adrian into the near future, to where the frog is almost ready to be released. They've made good time thus far, they just have the endgame to deal with. Adrian is now going to take Ellie up to Durst, where she'll have to kill the Black Queen and take her ring. Normally, it's impossible to kill the queens as a sprite, but Ellie still has a Fear No Anvil, which negates that restriction entirely. Ellie got lucky yet again and landed a critical hit which one-shot the Black Queen. Very good. Before Ellie goes to Prospit to repeat the process with the White Queen, she also has to stop by the Ectobiology lab and create paradox clones of herself and Adrian. Despite this being an any percent speedrun, meaning it's acceptable for the runners to win in a Doom timeline, ignoring the Ectobiology segment can sometimes crash the game if certain other flags haven't been triggered. Ellie also has some time to spare while Adrian does his job, so she won't be losing much time by being safe here. All Ellie really has to do here is just hit a couple of buttons, detect her and Adrian's past selves, begin the ectobiology process, and from there, she can just let the machine do all of the work. Once the babies spawn in, she doesn't have to do anything more with them. They'll be shot off to Earth once the reckoning starts. Ellie now has to fly down to Prospit, where she'll kill the White Queen for her ring as well. You don't have to kill the White Queen in a normal game. Being a friendly NPC, she'll likely just hand it over if asked, but chatting to her will lose a bit of time, so we're just gonna kill her instead. Don't worry, she's prototyped with Ellie, so she understands. Okay, so the White Queen took a few more hits than expected this time around, but she still went down without much issue. The rings are now ready to be burned in the forge, which she'll go do now. It's all up to Adrian now to defeat the kings. While Ellie did all that stuff, Adrian went down to the battlefield to fight the White King. The White King's also a friendly NPC, but he's gonna die as well just to save time. Adrian is now gonna fight the Black King. Even with his overpowered weapon, the fight can be a bit tricky if you mess something up. Thankfully, Adrian did have that forethought at the beginning to boost his health with the door glitch just in case. Adrian has taken the Black King down with relative ease and has also acquired his scepter. Because the kings died so quickly, the reckoning hasn't even had a chance to start, so Adrian is just going to start it himself with a white scepter. He's just going to let it run for a little bit so that the paradox clones can get down to Earth, which is the most important part. He'll also need to allow 1 or 2 meteors to drop down to Skaia's surface to crack it, and allow the Genesis Frog a path to the middle of Skaia. Luckily, because the players entered so fast, and because Sburb is such a rarely run game, Skaia's not going to spawn many defense portals, so that whole process will only take a couple of seconds. Alright, now that the reckoning has started, the paradox clones should be already gone, and meteors should be dropping on this location any second, so Adrian is just going to destroy both the scepters here. Adrian takes himself and Ellie to the victory platform. Unless they've unknowingly soft-locked the game, which has unfortunately happened in the past to a lot of runners at this point, they should be more or less finished with the run. They now just have to wait for the Genesis Frog to be released. There it goes, the frog's going up, get ready for time! Alright, universe has been created, now just waiting on the door to form. And time! Congratulations! Adrian and Ellie have completed Sburb with a time of 15 minutes 12 seconds. A new world's paradox space record for the Sburb any percent category. There were a few little mistakes here and there, but that was overall an incredible time. I'm sure they're going to be holding on to that record for quite a while. Excellent work, you two. Now go on and take a rest. You've earned it.
Oh, and for those of you watching the VOD at home, there's going to be a highlight reel of their run included at the end here. Next up on the schedule, Doc Scratch to Skaian Speedsters. It's going to be played...
Actually, I... Yes, please.